Should we go ahead and get started? It is 2 minutes past the hour.
Let's do it.
Yes, we can. And I think I'm getting us started off today. And wow, that is a lot of people. I could not see the numbers when I had my screen shared. So thank you so much for being with us, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping things. So the chat is for, oh, hello, Susan Wagner from Chicago. The chat is for technical issues if you have them. That's what MCN has reminded us. And we have a support team. So if you do have something come up, drop a note in there. And then the Q&A is for questions. We're going to be keeping an eye on that as we go along. And so we've got questions we're posing to each other. We encourage you to jump in and share if that inspires anything for you. If you have your own questions, please throw them in there. There is going to be some time at the end. Dana will take us through that, but we welcome interaction, obviously, all throughout. We also want to acknowledge Microsoft for the Registration Assistance Fund for their sponsorship there, as well as Axio for sponsoring Ignite, which I'm so excited about tonight. We'll have to see what that's going to be like. I'm sure it's going to be super cool, as always. My name is Brad Dunn. I'm the Web and Digital Engagement Director at the Field Museum in Chicago. I use he, him, his pronouns. My description of me, for those who can't see me, is I am, will not surprise you to learn, white, middle-aged male with glasses and wearing a sort of a floral shirt. I've been accused of working in a basement. I'm not actually. I do have a window off here to the side, so don't worry about me. I do get some vitamin D. And with that, I will hand it off to Susan.
Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Edwards. I work at the Hammer Museum, which is a small, mid-sized museum in Los Angeles affiliated with UCLA. We're technically a university art museum, which many people don't know. And I am a white woman with glasses. I'm going to describe myself the way Brad did. White woman with glasses, middle-aged, wearing a graphical shirt, and there's some photographs and pictures on the wall behind me. I use she, her pronouns. I think that's me. I'm going to hand it off to Dana now.
Hi, everyone. I am Dana Allen-Greil. I use she, her pronouns. I am also a white woman in her early 40s, and I'm wearing a blue shirt that says "A Healthier Ocean Starts Here." It's a Monterey Bay Aquarium shirt, where I work as the Director of Digital Strategy. And the aquarium is on the homelands of the Ohlone, Costanoa, and Esselen Nation peoples, past, present, and future. I'm so excited to interact with you all today. MCN is so near and dear to my heart and has been for a long time. I really feel like this community is amazing. So thank you for joining us. This is really going to be a conversation. We want to hear from you. Jump in at any point. As Brad said, I think we want to use the Q&A for sort of questions you want to pose to the panelists, in the chat for technical. Just so you can have a rough idea of the outline of the session, we have 3 questions we're going to pose to one another and to all of you. So I will put them into the chat as we talk about them. We're going to talk about each of those for roughly 15 minutes, and then we'll leave kind of 10 minutes at the end for just open dialogue. So that's where we hope this will go. It can be kind of freewheeling. And I think we were also going to share a little bit in our intros of why we wanted to do this session. So I'll start that and then kick it around and put the first question in the chat. So for me, the idea of a pivot has been something that hasn't sat well with me. It's a word I've heard over and over, and it just didn't feel right. And I was trying to understand why. And I think for me, it really just undervalues the work that so many of us have been doing for a really long time. In my case, I've been working in digital for about 20 years, in museums, archives, and now an aquarium for about 17. And we've really laid the groundwork for where we are this year. This year has been so tough, but also we've been setting the stage to really shine digitally for a long time. And so the idea of a pivot, I think, again, just for me, I wanted to just unpack what that means and where it doesn't ring true for me. So that's why I wanted to do it. And I just love Susan and Brad, and it's fun to talk with them. So Susan,
Yeah, so you just said that beautifully, Dana. You echoed exactly what I was going to say. I mean, for me, I also was a little uncomfortable with this idea of a pivot, and I know that a lot of museums were talking about right after the coronavirus quarantine began that everything has changed. Oh my God, the world has changed. And I was sitting here in my digital seat thinking, nope, I'm still doing my job the way I was before. It might be a little more crazy and the pace might be faster. But the sort of digital first mindset and the way the digital world works really actually didn't change. So again, as Dana said, I agree. I'm really interested in unpacking what that means and how we can also focus on the strengths of working in a digital world and how that actually did prepare our museums for the craziness that is 2020. Brad, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be thoughtful and only add something new because I agree with both of you. And it felt like this moment where a lot of people in the building began talking like us all of a sudden. And there was a lot of sense of like, but wait, we've been doing this stuff forever. I think the early things were not a pivot, and I fought back hard against that. The early initiatives and things that we did were more leaning, I like to say, like leaning into things that we were already doing, but pressing the gas on those things to go further. I think the organization now is actually beginning to pivot or to design things in a more meaningful way. And it's not just my team. There's a lot of great programs coming out of our learning group. One of them's actually just started a half hour ago, actually. And so I think there's some innovation happening, but it took us a while to get there. So I was very resistant and remained to this idea of the pivot. I actually don't mind it. And it's like part and parcel with this idea of being agile, which we've all been talking about for years, literally in terms of adopting those practices. But it's not a fair description to describe, I think, what the vast majority of us actually started doing in March.
all right, so with that, I'm going to put the first question in the chat that we're going to discuss. And it is basically, in what ways did your institution panic? And if your institution did not panic, I think we'd love to hear that too. All stories are welcome here. So I think, Susan, you might want to kick us off with, in what ways did your institution panic?
Yeah, so our institution is very lucky that we are a free museum. So admission is not part of the calculation in our budget. So we were super, super lucky that we did not have the immediate income panic of no visitors coming to the museum. That was a blessing. But we were very, very concerned about our audiences disappearing, and we wanted, the main panic was we need to get everything online so that the audiences are there when we do open again. We don't want to lose people. So that was a full-on push to put everything. I mean, I think every museum saw this at the beginning. All these museums and institutions and archives and zoos and aquaria were loading tons of their content, their educational content, whatever they had, putting it online, pushing it to press, putting it on their homepages, to sort of maintain, to like be relevant still. Like we're still here, even though we don't have a building. The one other really big way that our museum panicked a little bit was the curators became very, very interested in social media all of a sudden. That was the most visible aspect of the museum instantly. It wasn't the galleries. And they became laser focused on that. And we've had a lot of really interesting conversations around how social plays in with the curatorial role of the institution. And it's been interesting because we've had more attention from them than we ever have. And there's been some great conversations. I'm going to pass it on to
Susan. Can I ask you a question about that? So do you feel you have better relationship with your curators now? Has this been a relationship building opportunity or
yes, not? Absolutely. It's an opportunity. We're still working on it. It's an opportunity for sure. And we're working on figuring out how to work better together. I think the digital and the communications team was able to not pivot, but to lean in to doing digital very quickly and shift gears and figure out what our goals needed to be and how we needed to what we needed to focus on. And for the curators, I think it's a little slower for them. The pace of an art museum curatorial team is a little slower. Even at the Hammer, where we do things very quickly compared to other museums, the pace is slower. So it's been an ongoing conversation since March, and we're still working on it. But yes, it's a total opportunity to get other teams in the institution understanding more clearly how digital can work for them and how the digital experience of the museum can be a key experience.
Cool. There's like some incredible conversation going on in the chat. It makes me wish I could just talk to people that much more. Dana, do you want to jump into this one next?
Yeah, I mean, I want to give some context about my organization, which is we are still closed. We've been closed since March 13th. And by the way, on March 11th, we launched a 2-year web redesign, all new ticketing platform with Tessiture, a new email marketing system. Like, we were exhausted. And then the next day we closed our institution, and we've been closed ever since. And in that time, we've laid off about 1/3 of our staff. We're a pretty large organization. We were about 550 staff. We're down to 360. That's been really devastating. We've also lost more than $50 million in admissions already. And this, for me, I've worked in museums, mostly in DC, for most of my career. So coming to an aquarium and realizing how actually incredibly expensive it is to keep an aquarium going, even when the doors are closed, between caring and feeding for the animals and the utilities, that really doesn't go down at all with us being closed in any way. So I think in some sense there was panic kind of from everyone about revenue and what this is going to mean for our institution, for our team members. Layoffs have been on people's minds from the beginning. And I think everyone really wanted to chip in and help out, which is amazing. That sense of community of everybody, we're all in this together, has definitely been a warm spot of this really hard time. But revenue was definitely a focus from a lot of staff and from leadership. And I got a lot of questions about how can we monetize all these great things we're already doing? How can we monetize what we're doing on social? Or how can we get people to pay for our online content? And we have a fairly large digital team. So I think I saw Liz Neely commented in here, and I really love this idea of what can we do that's meaningful and important. I said, she said, how do we make an impact in this difficult time? And so I think panic's probably not the right word for this, but the soul searching that my team did was really around what's important right now? What can we give to our community that's in pain? Our team is very driven by empathy and love for our community, especially on social, as well as our education team and the communities they serve. And so there was a lot of like, what's the right way to approach our content? In the past, there was maybe more of a lot of memes, a lot of joking, and that didn't feel right in March. And we really leaned into things that make people feel calm, ways to encourage people to breathe and focus and take time for themselves. So those feel like two very different things. How do we make money off of this? And how do we give other people what they need because they've supported us for so long? So that was my experience.
So yeah, our experiences at the Field Museum. I think that's actually really great of you, Dana, and I'll do the same, recognize that, I mean, it's not just for those of us who remain, but there were a lot of people that were let go. I think at the Field Museum, we lost 20-ish% of our staff, some folks very close to my team as well. So that was something that was on people's minds from the beginning, and we should acknowledge that people produced all this amazing work on top of the anxiety of wondering if they were going to lose their job. For the Field Museum, revenue is we've had a huge revenue hit, and it is and individual ticket sales are a huge part of our take every year of our overall revenue. But for us, what we were hearing from our executive teams were that it's about retaining and keeping audiences engaged. On the one hand, it was through institutional advancement, membership, and donors. Lots of donor events sprung up online out of nowhere, things that actually we wouldn't even be doing in the past, but just things to keep them engaged, which were not run by my team, but were actually run by institutional advancement, although we end up supporting a number of them. But keeping them engaged and then thinking about fundraising. We were closed from March 13th to July. I think we started letting members in July 17th, and then we opened to the public, I think about July 24th. Yeah, in terms of the panic, I actually caught something interesting that Coven said about the patterns of layoffs. And it got me thinking here about something I honestly hadn't thought about before, that obviously the curatorial and executive teams tend to be at the sort of the last that might ever get touched in these layoffs. That at least seems to be the pattern. And yet we're trying to figure out how to live and be sustainable as institutions in this COVID world going forward. I think that is an excellent point. And it is true. I have noticed a number of things, a number of layoffs around the industry that seem to fly in the face of the sort of mission-based objectives that we have most of our institutions. I have to say the Field Museum had some losses in some really critical areas that we are trying to figure out how to move forward without some of those staff. But I think it's a good question, because we do have to get, I think we have to continue to make sure to not panic, to move past that, because now we're looking at 2021, and what does 2021 mean with COVID, knowing that we're going to be planning much of the year in the same way we have been. So how can we begin to change how we're working and actually make a pivot to ways that are sustainable? And I do think that really, we've got to think about what staff we need to obtain to hit the goals that we're actually outlining. And I also think that there needs to be a moment to pause and understand what those goals might be. If we're not selling tickets, or in our case, we are, at least for the time being, still able to sell tickets, but we're at a fraction of our overall attendance. So we do need to channel our energy into identifying what are those long-term goals that are both revenue-based, where will that money come from, as well as just the mission-based objectives, and how will those be funded? And I think it's something a lot of institutions are still struggling with.
Wow, there's a lot going on in the chat, which is awesome. I'm going to segue us to the next question, and I think it touches on a lot of what people are asking. Things like, how have you figured out ways to show the invisible labor that goes into digital? Did you develop new protocols or expectations with your curators? Was a question for Susan. And has the increased pressure to grow digital everything collided with the hiring freezes and shrinking revenues? So our question is, if there was no pivot, what has enabled you to be successful? And I think that's really about, if it's not a pivot, what is it? And what did you have before that has helped you? And maybe also what remain challenges, right? What challenges remain? Let's put them in the right order there. So I'm going to put that in the chat, and that's what we'll be talking about next.
Should I kick this off again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, I would like to say, and I think I've said this before, that if there really was a pivot and we were reinventing everything, that would be disastrous. Like if we really were reinventing our museums, that would be insane. So what we did at the Hammer is we leaned into our mission and our audience awareness goals, our goals of creating awareness of the Hammer out in the digital space that we already had. So we looked at the things that we knew were successful, and we leaned into those and we amped them up. One of the things that we were doing in IGTV, we had started taking small 1-minute clips of like very meaty quotes by people like Al Gore and Roxane Gay, and putting them on IGTV, and had huge views, like tens of thousands of views. And we just started doing those 3 times a week instead of just 1 time a week, and sort of trying to drum up awareness and sort of expand the reach that we had on our digital platforms. we also started putting our programs online. Like, so the Hammer had already been live streaming most of our programs that happened in our theater for over 5 years. And we did 2 to 3 programs a week plus tours every week. So we had more than 300 programs we were doing every year. And like 150 of them or so were being live streamed simultaneously with the live program. So we already had a lot of the infrastructure there to just shift and put our programs online. It did require, so there was like a pivot and a not pivot. The pivot was that our AV team, who normally are dealing with tech in a theater, they're dealing with lighting and cameras and running the video and making sure the speakers, the mic works. And in the theater, their theater, the stage changed from our theater to Zoom, and they had to learn everything about Zoom and figure out everything about showing videos on Zoom and having multiple speakers and all sorts of technical details. But the idea of streaming our programs live and having the audience that we already had an audience there for our live programs. And that just only grew once we started putting our stuff online. So all of this in my mind is really just a digital mindset. The idea that we test, we learn from what we test, we iterate, we try again, and we repeat that cycle over and over again. It's something that the team at the Hammer that works in digital is very used to. And I would say that the Hammer is an institution that is very flexible and agile in this way. And we are used to experimentation. So that mindset served us very well when we shifted into the building being closed down. I'm going to stop there and let you guys, I want to hear your experience.
Yeah, so I've been at the aquarium for about 2 years, and I was so excited to join the aquarium because I had started social media when I was at the Smithsonian, at the American History Museum. I'd been that champion, that one-person show doing the email newsletter and the website and the social and all the things. And now, however many years later, joining the aquarium was such a eye-opening experience because they already had a social media team of 3, a really strong digital department, a leadership team that's very data driven. And I know many of you probably read Colleen Dillenschneider's blog, Know Your Own Bone, and the data showing how social it drives visitation, how it's important to how people rate their experience when they do visit, how it's mission supporting. And so coming into an organization that I felt like really valued digital in a way I had not experienced at the previous institutions I'd been at. I still think what we leaned into this year is recognizing that the 3 million followers we have on social was not just an opportunity to engage people in our mission, but it was also an opportunity to let them know we are a nonprofit. And if you love us, we need your support, which is something that we really didn't do a whole lot of on social previously. And I love that it's education focused and interpretation focused, but there was that piece of like, we need support too. That we did very like infrequently during like fall or end of year campaigns, and where we kind of leaned in was to just be more transparent, to say, if you love seeing these animals, you love seeing the experts we have on talking about their knowledge, you can support us. And that's been really successful for us. And I think we feel better about leading with that, like, here's the content, and then an ask for money, rather than gating our content where you have to pay first to access it. So I've been really pleased to see that has been successful for us. Kind of another way that we leaned in is we have an amazing group of members. I think we have 70,000 memberships or member households around the country, which I understand is very strong. And we used to host just really fun member nights in the space. And so that went digital pretty early on. And we took that opportunity to say, hey, how can we make these, what's unique about this opportunity this year? And one of the things is we could go into kind of these little nooks and crannies of the institution for behind the scenes programming, where we could never have fit 1,000 members in our jelly lab, or to show how we cultivate cephalopods. We even had one of our jelly aquarists is a musician, and he just jammed out with the jellies, which is not, it was a very intimate experience. It's not something that would have like translated well to a physical event. And so those we've streamed live on YouTube, only, you know, giving the link only to members, and we've had really great participation in that. And now we're starting to think about, these have been so successful. Our members love them. They want us to keep doing them even when we reopen. So we've been able to get leadership to say, yes, we're going to give you the resources needed to continue producing these videos. And now, kind of with securing that support, now we can actually go out and sell essentially virtual memberships to say, we're going to have 6 of these events a year. You can be a member. It's not just about visiting. So kind of already having that strength of a great member program, of having people on our team who are incredible on camera. One thing I think is so strong about our team at the aquarium is our social team all came from guest experience, which I think is pretty rare. So all of them worked on the floor interacting with guests for at least 5 years. They have marine biology degrees. So they're not only incredible subject matter experts, but they're just really fantastic performers and great at engaging people. And that means we can do live streaming so well. They're perfect at it. They're so fun to watch. And so we just do a lot more of that than we did before. We were doing it before, maybe once a week. Now we're doing it multiple times a week. And they had ideas that they pitched to me in January, February about gaming on Twitch. And I was like, that's great. Like, let's do that sometime. And then we were really lucky that Animal Crossing kind of released, I think, early March. And our team has just had a blast playing Animal Crossing, building islands, inviting other folks from other institutions. We had someone from the field, someone from the Smithsonian, someone from another aquarium, someone from the Getty come play on our island and just like nerd out and have fun. And I think people really respond to like seeing humans have fun right now. That's really, we all want to be part of that. So that was something that was an idea that we just accelerated. And same with our distance learning. That was something that was in the works to do online courses. It was supposed to launch 2 years from now. So we just very rapidly, I don't want to say just, it was a huge effort, but it was something that we've been laying the groundwork for, and we just really accelerated that. And that's also been incredibly successful for us. We've had 30,000 students enroll in our courses since May. So that's huge. And really, I think for us, success has been about that staff, like that incredibly talented staff and their ability to have their finger on the pulse of what people need right now. And so what we've done is very human. I should maybe talk about some of the things we've done. We released a series of meditations. They were 10-minute guided meditations back in March, 1 a day, right after we closed. And that's something that now has had, I think, 5 million views. Of the 6 videos have gotten like 5 million views over time. And we actually re-released them last week, since last week was a very stressful week for our community. And I'm sure you can all understand that. And that's
Dana,
generated, yeah.
Someone asked what platform the courses are on.
They are on Thinkific. Happy to chat about that or put you in touch with the folks who are running that. Yeah, so I'll shut up, but I think a lot of what we've done has been like inside of us, and I'm really glad we've been able to retain our digital team intact despite all the layoffs. We actually even added a person. Despite the hiring freeze, we kind of moved someone over from guest experience who was working with volunteers, and now she does social care and email marketing for us because there was recognition. We're doing more of this than ever before. We're the face of the institution right now, and we need support.
Yeah, so much to dive into here. I think so at the Field Museum, we, like I said early on, I like to think of what we did was we leaned. So the first thing is sort of leaning into the staff. I mean, the thing that was great is I am super fortunate that I have such a high performing team that who we've a lot of processes on our team. There's not a lot of museum-wide processes. We've worked on that, but the one that we have that was huge was a thing that we have called the Field Content Plan, which was borrowed a couple of years ago from our colleagues at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. They had this brand content plan. We adapted it for our needs, and that is co-owned by Caitlin Carney, who I know many of you know on our team, as well as Maggie Holcomb, a teammate of ours in marketing. That is a framework that provides criteria for assessing the massive amounts of content that come to us from all around the museum, and helps us understand like where it should live within our distribution channels and how and what and what goals it serves. So there's very specific criteria that something has to meet to go in there, and so it provides this framework that helps us bring content creators from across the museum together. And that was a very, it's been a very strong program the past year. It's really, that's one of the big success stories of the Field Museum's collaboration across departments. And if we hadn't had that, I think it would have been even more chaos. So something that wasn't working is events, for example, and still the museum is now starting to think through who specifically own events. There's a lot of freedom, shall we say, to initiate events that come out of different departments. Could be science, different divisions within science, could be learning. I mean, in fact, learning actually does have a mandate to for much of the programming, but there is freedom for others to do things. And so we're trying to bring that process around that right now. But I saw David Nunez had asked in the chat, you know, what's working well or better. And I would say this Field Content Plan has been huge for us. It really provides a content strategy and a framework for assessing that museum-wide. If we hadn't had that, I don't know. Again, I don't know what we would have done in that moment or what the museum would have done. To get like more tactical as an example of something we had built and had actually been around for a while. And I gave this credit last year, and I'm going to end up doing it again right now, which was that Susan Wagodner, who at the time was on our team at the museum, she's at the Obama Foundation now. But when there was a moment well over like a year and a half ago when we had lost our budget in the middle of the web redesign. We were maybe in the back third of it. And she came to me and just said, if I'm looking at all the things we have to build, one thing that I think could have huge impact is moving up the learning centers, some of their initiatives, including this learning hub. We should get that built right now. And because of that insight she had, that was a thing we had built and had been sitting on and promoting to some degree for months, and it didn't get that much traffic. And almost overnight, it became one of the most visited things. Now we also reworked the homepage and created a takeover that was all learning and at-home resources that people could use. And then Andrea Ledesma, who everyone here knows, really led the charge with the rest of our digital team, Emily Suter, Roger Twan, to build out new. To actually rework it to include like new personas and new contexts. So it's not just grade level and topic now, but there's what kind, are you a parent, teacher, you know, are you a parent or caregiver? There's all these different criteria that people can lock in to find things resources that are useful for specifically where you are. So literally at home or in the museum or outside, things that you can do with your kids while the weather is nice outside, all these parents stuck at home. So, you know, there was some pivoting there, but the truth is, if we hadn't built that thing months before, we wouldn't have had that. And it became one of the most valuable things during our, during that closure. Someone else, and I might not say her name right, so I'm going to apologize, but Adriana Castillo asked, you know, did you find our online audiences changed in terms of demographics or use of online content? And yes, I mean, like, as you would expect, like clockwork, we went from being majority mobile visitors to the website to desktop. And whereas we had like 65 to 70% of site visitors were planning a visit and visiting those related pages that facilitate visit, exhibitions and things like that, it completely flipped so that it was all like our resources. And the other interesting thing that happened, and I think something that we had been preaching on our team for a while, but it really came together organically without us having to do much, to be honest, is that we were able to get different departments to work together to think in terms of audiences rather than the siloed departments in which they exist. So we have a science action division, which produces all this amazing content that's conservation related. And they've really been single, very focused on a specific set of audiences in Chicago. Then we have the Brain Scoop, which we've always promoted. And then there's content coming out of the Learning Center. And the institution hasn't traditionally thought of audiences first. They've thought of sort of departments. And so like I always say, we're organizations, not org charts. So it doesn't matter where these things come from. We were able to sort of bring together like rapid color guides from our science action division and a game that the Learning Center built, as well as their learning resources and the Brain Scoop and some outside resources, accessed pointing people to the Biodiversity Heritage Library online application, and bringing these things together in a way that we'd always preached, that we're about audiences first. So it doesn't matter where something lives on the website in terms of the org chart, but it matters that it reaches audiences. And so that was a quick change we made, but we were able to do that because of the investment in the CMS that we use and in the frameworks for looking at content and having a content strategy. If we hadn't done that, then if we hadn't had that, this would have been a much different year, I think.
I want to make a comment. I want to tell a failure story based on that I'm reminded of from what you said, Brad. And the Hammer Museum, our website has always been very focused on visiting the physical museum. So like all of the content is around come to the museum, see the exhibitions, come to our programs. And we haven't had historically a lot of resources online for teaching or for scholars. Or it's hard to find if it's there. And when our traffic has like fell off a cliff in March when we closed, and that was largely because it just wasn't there. And we actually are in the process of creating a new resource, which is going to be an online video archive of recordings of our public programs. And for like a hot second, which was about like 10 days, we were like, can we just get this up now? Because it wasn't completed yet. And then we'll have content and people will come to us. And thankfully, thank my stars, our leadership realized that was going to be a ridiculously heavy lift and we decided not to do it. But our web traffic has fallen dramatically because we don't have this content and we didn't have it set. So kudos to you, Brad, that you guys, you had set that stuff up in advance and it was there and it was a place that people could go. The one other point I want to make that has come up with everybody, with all of your guys' comments and a lot in the chat around working cross-departmentally with other teams and getting people to sort of be more audience focused. At the Hammer, we've had this very interesting thing happen where there is a raised awareness of all the people that are able to view our programs now from all these different countries. Mm-hmm. So people from Pakistan and Nigeria and all over Europe and who are watching our programs. And I have to hold my tongue because I'm like, you know what? People from those countries have been watching our programs before. Like you're just excited about it now. There's a renewed openness to like seeing the positive in the digital space now and to trying to see that outreach. Whereas before the curatorial team didn't see it. They didn't want to know about all the people in Nigeria who are watching our programs online. It's interesting.
And to be clear, that is super interesting, Susan. And I think that I've heard that story a lot, that the recognition that these things are going on, they're not actually new, that there's been a lot that we've been doing for a long time. I mean, our traffic also fell off a cliff. So it's definitely not all been roses. But what was interesting to me was that the traffic, and there was no need for most of the traffic because most of them were planning a visit. And so that we're able to get some traffic back, I think it's been roughly a half of what we normally get. And during the closure, it was all focused on the sort of like learning and museum at home type activities. And but yes, plenty of failures along the way this year, for sure.
So let's talk, I think there's a lot of interest in this, like what happened to your stats and how did your demographics change? So let's talk about that while we also transition into how should we invest in digital, which is our last question before we open it up to just it looks like thousands of chats we have going on here.
I can't keep
So
track.
obviously a lot to talk about here. I will say we had a massive spike in March and April, like 5 times our normal traffic, and a huge increase in social followers. And we've seen just like bananas growth on YouTube, Twitch, and even on Facebook, because we do a ton of live video. So video platforms for us, TikTok is the other. We don't do a ton on TikTok, but we've got lots of fans there. So for us, video has been a huge, and live video, specifically live video where people can interact with us. And again, as I've mentioned, our team is so good at that. So I think we're very lucky in that way. I think our web traffic spiked so dramatically for 2 reasons. One, our live webcams, which apparently have been around since the early 2000s. And thank goodness, because people can see jellies and sharks and the kelp forest, and it's literally the same thing we've been offering. Sea otters, don't forget the sea otters, for decades. But all of a sudden, people wanted kind of this counter programming to what's going on in the world. They want, the news is scary, the world is scary. I want to watch some jellyfish float. And that got really picked up by the media. It's been picked up by Wired. Last week, TED on election day streamed on all of their platforms, just calming ocean live stream content. So that, again, I know I keep hammering that home, but for us, it's really that, like, how does our content connect to how people are feeling emotionally, and what can it do for your audience? And so we definitely saw a huge spike. The second piece was our educational content. So we really quickly put out content for learning at home, and it was what we originally put out was to help parents, especially with younger kids, and maybe this is, I especially love this because I have a preschooler, and there was really nothing. I was kind of left with no resources and had to figure out what to do with him in a self-directed way, which is challenging for a 4-year-old. And then I think we've seen more teachers starting to pick up on the online courses I mentioned before and start assigning them to their students, but they were really designed to be for kids to do on their own. So those 2 things have kind of generated media attention, and we are seeing, for us, our numbers are double what they were last year still, even though we've come down from that 5 times growth. And our social audience that we've gained is super engaged, like twice as engaged as they were last year. So for us, that has sustained, but I want to be real about what that means. My team is exhausted and stressed, which they probably always were. They're overachievers. They're very sensitive people. They're amazing. But now they have this added pressure of feeling like I have to save the aquarium and save the world and save the ocean, politically. And so in terms of how should we invest in digital, for me, that answer is absolutely like caring for our team, giving them grace, being really clear with them about what's not expected of them. I do not expect them to save the aquarium. I expect them to do their jobs and take care of themselves. And I expect other people to respect that as well and not keep asking them for more and more and more. The other thing for me is I was asked to do the aquarium's first ever digital strategy this year, and it's a institution-wide strategy. I had 3 weeks to do it. For those of you that have worked on a strategy, it would have been nice to have like 3 months and like lots of Post-its. I didn't have that luxury. So I just kept it really simple and said, hey, you need to continue to invest in live video programming and have more staff who can help support that. And then the other is we have this super engaged audience. How do we turn them into supporters? Whether that's subscribe for our email, and then when we ask you to take action to contact your representatives, you're ready to do that. Or how do we turn someone who loves our live webcam into a member or a donor? And really focusing not on like continuing audience growth in terms of wider, more. And instead, how do we deepen the relationships we've started and turn that into more substantial support? So the money I've been allocated for next year is really focused on things like marketing automation. How do you move people along a journey? Not like super sexy stuff, but it's a piece of infrastructure we don't have right now. We have to do all of that very manually, and it's really critical for us to sustain this going forward. So what about the rest of you? How are you thinking about investing in digital?
I just want to double down real quick, and I'll keep this brief, Susan, if you want to jump in too. But like people has been the key. Like without our people, because they made things work where there was process and where there wasn't. And I think, I mean, you're talking about your social team. I'm thinking of, we've never had like audience growth as a metric. Actually, it's always been about engagement, and we used to actually do a deeper sort of sentiment analysis of sort of how do we suss out curiosity in that engagement? How do we know that that's a thing that's happening? But in spite of that, I mean, Catherine Urich, who's our social media manager, is a one-person show with some assistance from a couple people here and there. But I think in our first 2 months, we also had like a 17% spike in our growth in our audience, which is, normally we're doing 3, 4, 6% growth a month. So this really big spike, I think, speaks toward the public's. There's no data behind this, right? But it definitely felt to me like, oh, people are turning to us for something during this time, and they're turning to museums in general during this time. And one of the choices that Catherine made was, as you said, to like bring some joy. Like, how can we have fun? How can we keep sharing science, but how can we really have fun? Which has been the inflatable T-Rex costume series, which every time we do it is just we sort of joke that we're like, oh, that's way more popular than the science. But that's obviously, it's easier to have a moment of joy with that. All the work we do is important, but she brought that joy to it. And then like there was things we did with the penguins at the shed next door that also did really well. So people were really looking for that joy, and that was probably one of the most valuable things we brought to people. And the investment there is the people. In this case, it was Catherine. And so it is, and Caitlin helps her a lot with some of that work. Caitlin's often sometimes the person in the suit. And so, so there's the people I think are the most important thing to invest in. And I do think processes and collaboration, right? And so I had to get my mind out of as we were coming up with these questions for the panel, I was like, well, what are the things we invest in besides that don't involve like dollars? Because those can be rare. And so for us, it's really been, again, processes and relationships where things haven't worked as well in the museum. It's been because there hasn't been like long-term relationship development there. And areas where it has worked better, even where there's not a process, it's been relationships. So it is about continuing to build those relationships with people across the institution. Susan, what for you, what does investment look like?
Well, I want to also tip my hat to the labor of staff. And I saw several people in the chat and in the Q&A mention the invisible labor of digital. And it can be very invisible. I think it's become more visible because of this situation in 2020 with the increased collaboration with other departments. For example, our curatorial team, we have the opportunity of making our work visible and showing them exactly what is involved in doing this work and how labor intensive it is. So I think one way to invest is to invest in the co-education of our peers and helping make our work more visible. But I always quote Nick Honeysett when you ask where should I invest in digital? Well, it depends on what you want to do, right? Is your goal audience engagement? Then you need to look at your social team and your web team. Is your goal scholarship and getting your collection online? You need to look at your digital asset management, your collections management team, photography. So it depends on where you want to grow and what you need to do and what your mission, and that's based in your mission and what your institution is trying to achieve. If you have a digital strategy, that's awesome. Yay, Dana, for doing that in 3 weeks or 3 days or whatever you had for it.
Weeks.
So one thing that I think is clear though is that the digital world of our museums is here to stay. So this appointment-based online event is not, I don't think it's going away. Someone mentioned that your audiences are asking you to keep doing it. And we have the same thing happening at the Hammer. We have a weekly mindful awareness meditation session that we've been doing for over 10 years that we quickly shifted online the week after we closed. And where a program that used to get our theater on site had a max of 295 people that we could fit. And sometimes it was kind of full. We're in an area by the university where there's lots of office buildings and people would come from office buildings. And now we are regularly getting over 300 people. Last week, the week of the election, we had over 1,000 people RSVP, and unfortunately had a 500 person cap on our Zoom account. So, and these people have been asking us for months to keep doing it online, even after the museum opens. So I don't think this is going away. Staff is starting to realize how many more people we can reach and how much more we can serve our audience by being online as well. However, we have staff who have shifted their work from the on-site world into the online world for the coronavirus closure, and they actually have other jobs. And when the museum opens again, they need to go back to those jobs. So not only is the work incredibly we've been working at like more than 100% capacity, a lot of our staff, and we're all exhausted. The two examples we have is our audiovisual, our AV team, who run the back end of all of our Zooms. If we open our theater, if we open again and we have to go back to the theater, they can't be in two places. They can't do both of those things. And our visitor experience team has also been the champions behind they moderate the chat, and they're the ones in the chat and helping people with technical issues if they can't get into Zoom. So our frontline staff that normally are helping visitors in our galleries and on site have moved into the Zoom world. And again, we actually had this challenge last week because we were a vote center. We were an 11-day vote center, and our visitor experience team that is normally working in our Zoom programs had to work on site. And it was a challenge, the scheduling of because these people can't be in two places at once. So when we reopen, we have to, if we're going to continue doing this, we have to contend with this and figure out how we're going to manage the staffing.
Yeah, we're not open yet, but I think this is I would love to hear from organizations that are open how you're tackling this issue. I know for us, when we reopen, we will likely be closed 2 days a week as opposed to being open all 7. And so we've talked about those 2 days a week that were closed as an opportunity to do filming and live streaming from the aquarium. So people would essentially shift from interacting with the public physically to using those 2 days for that. I also
and that's hard. That shift is hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
I mean, mentally.
Yeah. I do also want to share something that I think attracted some attention in terms of preventing burnout. Our social team, I cannot take credit for this. My CMO, who's my boss, is a big fan of King Arthur flour, which I think is now King Arthur baking. And their social team, I guess she said, frequently will say, hey, we're taking the weekend off. We need to go, I don't know, bake or whatever. And she said, hey, it was a particularly stressful time for us. We had thought we were going to be reopening, and we put tickets on sale and our website crashed and lots of awfulness ensued. And our social team was just really hanging by a thread. And my CMO said, why don't they just stop posting for a week? And it actually didn't take a whole lot of convincing. I thought they were really going to fight me over that, but they were so ready. And we just were really transparent. We posted online, hey, we are exhausted and we're taking a break, and here's some live cams you can watch while we're out. And our audiences really responded to that. And I know I think Brad and some others have reached out to ask, how did we get permission for that? And I think this again is a testament to how much our leadership values our digital team, that it was actually their idea.
Yeah, I just floated it, Dana, yesterday to our CMO, so I'm trying to do it.
Yeah, so yeah. I think think about things that you can do that may seem I don't know why that seems so impossible, but just you need to take time and recover and rest.
Yeah, super important. And just doing a check here, we've been kindly reminded that we have a very hard out here in 4 minutes. And man, there are so many great comments and questions. Someone asked if I can share the field content plan. Yes, I will. Reach out to me on Twitter, and I will also, and I know that we're all very open to sharing resources that we can. I can put together a version of that can be utilized. I don't know the person's name, but I will. I'll make sure that that's available on Twitter here shortly. Yeah. Any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts, Susan or Dana, on this year we've had?
The burnout question, I am seeing the word everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I'm burned out. I'm going to fess up to that. I'm burned out.
And we've been talking about that for years, right? This is not new.
Yeah.
It's just incredibly exacerbated, just like everything else is this year. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say as I said when we opened this session, this community is incredible. I'm so grateful to all of you humans for sharing your experiences and supporting one another. And I think that's really important going forward, that we figure out how to continue doing that. Because this is a really tough time. This is a tough job. And we need to just help each other out. Whenever we learn something that works, share it. If you learn something that doesn't work, share it. Reach out. Yeah. Yeah,
I want to say, in preparing for this panel, we had several, the three of us met several times, like at the end of the day, and it would, at least for me, it would start to go into the nighttime. And we all admitted, like, it was really cathartic to share, like, very openly. And so we talked about, continuing to do that. And in fact, some of the conversations got so robust that we would stop each other and be like, we should save this for the panel. We're like starting to do the panel right now, so we should stop. And so I guess what I would say is people should be doing this more often. And I'm probably speaking for myself. I got zoomed out and I stopped doing happy hours and cocktail things a number of months ago, but connecting with colleagues has been rejuvenating. There's obviously a little bit of venting that happens, but then there's lots of support and brainstorming about ideas and just sharing experiences. And like I said, we're working right now to do a social media week off, and that idea came directly from Dana. And so reach out to your colleagues. I mean, maybe this is the spirit of MCN, and maybe this week and next week are the times to start making sure we're leaning into each other and supporting each other again, whether it's just listening or helping solve problems and share ideas. And again, more people asking about the content plan. I will make sure the next couple of days I have something on Twitter.
And feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Brand and Dana also online on social media. Let's chat.